This next video is going to be doing a wave trace on a fuel injector. So we're looking at the fuel injector electrically with an oscilloscope. And this time what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using the snap-on Virus and the oscilloscope function in the Virus. The first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to figure out what color wires your injectors have. So let's take a look at and see first of all where our injectors are and what color wires they have and all that kind of stuff. Now on this particular engine, this Pontiac engine, which isn't very uncommon, I mean it's quite common to have engines like these, the injectors are actually down inside the intake plenum assembly. So this thing right here that's in those little holes, that is actually the fuel injector rail. And you can see the end of the fuel injector rail right here. If you watched the injector balance test video I did, this is where I had the fuel gauge hooked up to read the fuel pressure on here. So these injectors are, the only way to get to these injectors is to disassemble or remove the intake manifold, which is probably a job that we don't want to do at this point. So this harness right here that comes up out of the fuel injector rail, or the intake manifold, sorry, comes up here. These are all of your injector wires right here. They're into that big connector. And so all we really need to do is probe right there. So anytime you can find a bolt connector like this for all of your injectors, you don't have to go to the individual injector. So it makes it real easy. So now we need to figure out, okay, if I want to test, say, cylinder number 2 or 3, what color wires, which wires goes to that cylinder? So what we're going to have to do is look up the service information. So with my iPad, what I did is I pulled up the wiring schematic on ProDemand, and I made it big so that I could see it. This is actually the whole schematic right there. So I just zoomed in on it so that I could see it nice and easy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check injector number 4. We were having problems with that the other day, so I figured I'd look at the injector and see what it looks like. So it looks like we have a light blue wire with a black tracer, and we have a pink wire. And if you notice, all of the injectors have pink wires going to them. But each injector has a different color wire going to it on the other side. So this one, injector number 6, is yellow. Injector number 5 is black with white tracer. 4 is blue with a black tracer. 3 is pink and black. And 2 is light green and black, and number 1 is black. So what that means is if you're testing all of the injectors, you only have to back probe one pink wire, and you've just attached yourself to all of them. See, they all connect up here, and that's at S101. That's your connection. So once you back probe the pink wire, then you can just go through and you can hit each one of the colored wires and look at each one of the injectors. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to back probe into that big bolt connector that I showed you. And I'm going to back probe the light blue wire, and I'm going to back probe the pink wire. And I'll show you what that looks like. So here's my bolt connector. And what I've done is I've back probed the light blue wire right down here. I don't know whether you can see that very well or not, but there's the light blue wire. And then on the other side of the connector, I back probed a pink wire. Now the reason I went on different sides of the connector is because I don't want my T-pins to accidentally touch each other. If they touch each other, you'll ground out the injector and you won't get a reading. And on some circumstances, when you're doing some back probing and testing and stuff, if your T-pins touch, you could actually damage something. For instance, like on a mass airflow sensor, on some of the vane airflow sensors, if you touch your T-pins together, you could short out that sensor and actually ruin the sensor, so you'll have to buy a new one. I had a student a few years ago that did that. They were testing a vane airflow sensor. Their T-pins touched, it shorted out the sensor, and it cost him $300. So I always make sure that my T-pins never touch each other anyway. And then I'm going to hook up my leads to it. So I'm going to hook up my red lead to the pink wire, and I'm going to hook up my black lead to the blue wire. And it usually doesn't matter which one you hook up to where. Sometimes on some different applications, if you hook up the wire backwards, so in other words, if you hook the black one up where the red one should go, your signal will be upside down on the scope. So all you have to do is just reverse the polarity. It's kind of the same thing with a meter. If you're measuring with a meter, if you get the negative number, just reverse your meter leads and you'll get the positive number. So that's how we've got it hooked up. And then on the back of the scan tool, I'm in the scope function, so I've got my scope leads plugged into the back of the scope channel, or scope on channel A right here, and this is the ground. I've got to this point on the oscilloscope, or on the scan tool, and I'm going to go into the scope function, which is this yellow button right here. So it says scope and multimeter. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to go to the lap scope. Actually, you can go to the lap scope if you want to, but it might be easier if we go over here to the presets. So hit preset, and I want to look at an injector test. So this is it right here. Click on that. We're ready to go. So now we start the engine up. Okay, here's my signal. So the way this signal is read is right here's where the injector turns on, comes over here. When it turns off, it spikes down, then it goes over. So your injector on time is, if these are in milliseconds per division, we start at 2 and we end at about 5.5. So about 3.5 milliseconds on time for an idle. Now watch what happens when I rev it up. So we're going to want to give more fuel to the engine. See, when I rev it up, this line goes over here. That's trying to get, it's leaving the injector on longer so it can spray more fuel. And when you don't want more fuel, then it shortens up. So I'll rev it up and then it'll stretch out over this way, and then when I let go of the throttle, it'll shrink back because it wants to shut the injector down. So see, it's revving up over here, let go, and it goes way over. Now to get this picture, when I first signed in, there's a couple of things that I wanted to show you how to adjust on this. So you click the setup button, and I hit trigger. This right here is going to move it horizontally or left and right. Okay. So if I click it all the way over here, see, you only see part of the injector waveform. You don't see the entire thing. So I want to go back and I want to move it over in the center of the screen so that I can see it. So now I can see the entire waveform. So that's where it starts, that's where it ends. Now the other thing I wanted to show you is the traces, trace 1. This right here, this button right here is going to give you the voltage scale. So if I drop it down to, say, 20 volts, because I think that's what it was on the preset, we don't even see the voltage. Okay, it's off the scale. I'm not even seeing it anywhere on here. So we'll go back and we'll put it back on where we found it. So trace 1, and we're going to go with we'll go with 100 volt. See what 100 volt does. So at the 100 volt scale, you can see most of it, but you can't see where it spikes down to. So that's going down to negative 80 volts. Actually, it's going down even further than that. I can't get this trace to go up that high. So yeah, it's going down way lower than that. So I can't see the entire trace on that. So let's move it up a little bit. So 200 volts, you can see the entire trace. So that's what I wanted to do. And then on this one right here, this trigger, you can just move it up and down with your thumb, and it moves it up and down on the thing. What I did is back here, I went into, we'll go back one more. So when we first started this test, I went into presets, and I chose the injector test. And with this injector test, I couldn't make any adjustments on it, and I couldn't see the entire waveform. So I'll start it up and show you. So see there, I couldn't really see the entire waveform. And I tried to make some adjustments on it, and it wouldn't take any adjustments because we were in a preset. So I went back one more, went into lab scope, 4-channel lab scope, and there we go, 4-channel lab scope. And then I set it up manually. So what I did is I went into setup, and I went to traces, and I went to trace 1, because that's what we're using is trace 1. And it gives you a button here that says auto find. A lot of times when you click that auto find, it will search for the signal and bring it right up for you. So I'm going to hit auto find. It'll come up with this little box here. And once it's done performing that little auto search, it sets up the scale to where you can see it. So that's probably the easiest way to go around, is to set it up manually rather than doing the presets. One last thing is what you're looking for on this trace. What I did is I paused the trace, so I captured it so we can look at it without the engine noise. You're looking for a nice clean vertical on time. So this is when the injector turns on right there. Nice clean straight up. Straight across, this is the duration, this is how long the injector is on and spraying fuel. And then you want to see a nice sharp decline when it shuts off. But this is just another way of testing the injectors. So hopefully this makes sense to you. We'll see you in the next video.